We should have been working on this deck together, but no, that's a good question. So every project, whatever you're doing, carries its fair share of constraints. So it could be budgetary, it could be timeline-wise, it could be the creative itself, it could be the objective. So I'll just give an example. We do a lot of work out there that you probably would never see that's like regional grocer spots, right? So when you get these briefs, it's like we're gonna advertise 4 or 5 SKUs and we're gonna go make an ad for Walmart and Safeway and Kroger and all these different retailers all over the country. And we're gonna brand it differently for each one. So we're basically gonna do 4 or 5 banners and change it up, whatever. So you get this brief and it looks really dry. It looks like there's a bunch of mandatories, there's a bunch of whatever, but then within that, you get to play. So once you sort of identify the rules, the constraints as it were, like, okay, well, we're advertising Cheerios and Go-Gurt and this new flavor or whatever and this thing, and it's 15 seconds, and the VO almost reads like a disclaimer at times, and like this is what these ads are. They're very much like, here's what's new at from General Mills now at Safeway. And by the time you write it, see the SKUs and whatever, it can feel a bit like a Mad Libs, where there's really not much left to do other than bring it to life. But I would also argue that it's sort of, as a drummer, for me, one of my favorite things to do is play with as few drums as possible. So you're familiar with the whole Keith Moon setup, where there's like toms till Tuesday and cymbals all over the place. And I actually love a kick drum, a snare drum, one cymbal. Let's make some music. Because it forces you. Having less at your disposal forces you to be more creative. So that's just one type of project we do out there where it's like, it's pretty much roughed in before we're even doing it. And we still have to make them cool and fun as a result. I don't have any to show you, unfortunately, but yeah, that would be one example. The flip side is we'll often get calls from clients, I'll stick with General Mills for the sake of the conversation, where they say, we want to do some online content for Chex Mix. Here's our budget. What should we do? Or we want to appeal to 22 to 26-year-old males, and we have this budget, and we need creative and deliverables, and go. That's really fun, but that's that much freedom can be hard too. Because when you can do anything, nothing points you directly at something. So you eventually end up pitching a few things and falling in love with an idea and going for it. So anyone here who works in the ad world knows that you'll get to a point where you're so far down the road with one idea, you might have that moment where you say, do we even like this idea? But it's too late. Like you're down the road, you're making it, you've got a shoot schedule, or you're into animation, or whereas with those sort of pre-roughed out projects of like, there's 4 SKUs and there's 6 grocers and here's the dates it's airing and blah. You don't end up with as much creative angst. You just want to make something beautiful that works for the job. So you don't stay up at night wondering if it's a good idea as much. But that's also a fun feeling, because when you know it's a good idea, you love that. You love that freedom. So, interestingly enough, we kind of got our start, me especially, I suppose, being like known as like the goofy guys, and they'll do something crazy. And for a while, we couldn't avoid the word viral, which I absolutely hate, and luckily that's kind of fallen out of parlance now. But interestingly enough, for all the silly stuff we've done, shirtless cooking demos, and well, not me, a really good-looking guy, but for all that fun stuff we've done, like bleeped out jokes and this and that and the other thing, I'm actually most proud of work we do that I don't direct, which maybe it follows that I wouldn't direct it, but we do a lot of work for St. Jude Medical. And we did a bunch of different stuff for them, a lot of which is not online because it's for legal reasons. But one is, you can find it, we did it with Modern Climate Agency, downtown Minneapolis. And it was a brand documentary for the 2 millionth heart valve they had installed in a person, or implanted in a person. So the piece is called 2 Million Hearts. If you look it up on YouTube, you can find it. But the piece itself is anchored by a really, really famous and remarkable heart surgeon named Arthur Denton Cooley, who was based out of Houston. And when we heard he was interested in being a part of this video, we'd like, how quick can we get on the next flight? We didn't even know what the rest of the piece was. We knew they wanted to celebrate 2 million implants, use it as a public-facing piece, show it to doctors and surgeons, and yes, interview a bunch of patients. But he was the only thing we knew at first. And that was a really good example of being super nimble, getting the interview in the can, settling right away on a shooting style, which was a lot like an Errol Morris thing. So we used like the Interatron approach, which is, if you've seen any Errol Morris films, they're looking right into the camera, into the lens, and it's very emotionally jarring. It's a very cool way to do an interview, especially if the material is heavy. And so we interviewed him, and then over the next 6 months, started grabbing other doctors, patients, inventors, whatever. And it came together into a really nice piece that's 7 or 8 minutes long. It's usually not pertinent to show in like pitches with CPG type places like General Mills or even Target or places like that, because it's just so long and it's so heavy. But what I love about it is it's a branded piece, but you don't even know what you're watching for 2.5 minutes. You're watching this guy talk, you see archival footage. It's not like it starts with a logo and disclaimer and voiceover and like, here at St. Jude. Like, it was a really cool example of a client giving us the freedom, see, theme, to do what we wanted with something and trust us, and the agency coming with a really great idea in tandem with us, and then the client letting it breathe, letting the piece live without logos, and all the sort of trappings of a corporate video went away on that one. So that's my favorite thing probably that we've ever done. And I maybe not so coincidentally had little to do with it, but but I really like that piece. And it's the whole other end of the extreme than like sort of fart jokes and things like that got us started. But anyway, yeah, that's a long answer. But brand documentary, 2 Million Hearts. Check it out on YouTube, or I think it's on our site too. That's really hard. I love that. Right? Anyone here a freelancer? A few? Okay, awesome. You have to motivate yourself, right? No one's going to do it for you. If you have a meeting to go to, yeah, but there are many mornings where earlier I was like, yeah, a cup of coffee, 3 hours in a patio, I live for that stuff. But if you do too much of that, you're not productive, and on the just meat and potato side of things, you won't be able to pay your heating bills after too long of that. But on the creative side, you'll get rusty, you'll get dry. So I love the freedom of not having to go somewhere every morning at 8:30 and stay till 5 p.m. when the whistle blows or whatever. But with that comes a lot of pressure to self-motivate and to do things in a way that don't require someone looking over your shoulder, and yet they get done. Something I love, though, is that a lot of workplaces are moving towards, either A, sort of results-based, whatever these terms are, but like, hey, look, if your work here is done for the day, get out of here. Or if, Nerdery is a great example. I want to eat every kind of cereal out there. I want to have a couple of Red Bulls. I see a keg that I would be hitting if it was a little bit afternoon. Like, if you run an office or a workplace, or if you're in one and you have the ability to give feedback, like, it should feel like a freeing place to be. So even if you have to stay somewhere because you have a job, a lot of us do, it should feel like a fun, creative place to be, whatever your kind of creativity is. But I do like that a lot of people are getting more to, if you're a writer and you got something to work on, get out of here. Like, go down to the coffee shop, do your thing, whatever. Frees your mind to do what it is you want to do. But yeah, as somebody running your own business, the worst parts about it, and when I started, people were like, you'll spend 2/3 of your time doing things that have nothing to do with what you actually do, like taxes and blah, blah, and that's totally true. Totally true. So if all I did all day was like come up with concepts and figure out how best to implement them and work with talented people and make good stuff, I'd probably work like 12 hours a week, because that's not the bulk of anyone who's run their own shop knows that you spend a lot of time doing logistical stuff. You just do. There's no way around it. So yeah, I don't know. If someone asks me how many hours a week I work, I always have a hard time answering that, because it's like, well, at any point I could decide I want to go play Frisbee golf, or I want to go to the Bulldog at 2:30 p.m. and see who wants to cut class and join me. But I'm also like never not working. And that goes for a lot of us in the email in your pocket era. But when you run your own shop, you have a lot more freedom, but you have a lot more responsibility as well. It's kind of a double-edged sword. We're lucky that we have I shouldn't say we have very few clients, but we have a few really solid long-term clients that have sort of a shared investment in those relationships. And we make each other better. So I have a pretty open dialogue with sort of key people at a lot of our key clients, General Mills, et cetera, et cetera. The specifics don't matter, but the reality is to be able to go out, have a beer, have a coffee, talk about a project, post-game it, as it were, and have a mutual conversation about where it could have been better, or how it was a success. That's huge. So specific project type mentoring, that's big. But as far as like making the work better, so we have a director. So I think Carl might have said we have offices in Chicago, New York, and LA. We have a director in Chicago, New York, and LA. Thank God we don't have offices in all those places, or we'd be out of business. But we have really creative people who are having different experiences all over the country as a part of our little fledgling company. So when we're working on something, it could have absolutely no need for my buddy Juan Antonio, our director Juan Antonio, who lives in Chicago, but we'll bring him in and say, like, what do you think about this? We'll just run rough cuts by him. We'll say, what do you think of the script? So there's a lot of workshopping that goes on, I guess a writer's room, for lack of a better word. But yeah, so a good give and take with clients, good give and take with the directors, and then just peers in the industry, or out of the industry. I'm lucky that my spouse is a copywriter. She works at a ad agency, so we bounce stuff off each other at times, and then get burnt out and say, let's not talk about advertising for a while, please. Yeah, and I'm kind of an oversharer online as well, so I'll often just like be throwing stuff out there and like, what do you guys think of this and whatever, and so I guess it takes a mentorship village is what I'm trying to say, but just be like, that's the whole humble piece though. Like, you can love what you do and have a blast doing it, but let other people tell you it kicks ass. You know, don't be the first one to say it, which is probably why I like that brand documentary I mentioned earlier, because I didn't have a ton to do with it, and I recognize it as being pretty sweet. That was a really cool feeling to have one of our best projects be something that I didn't really touch that much. That's kind of when I knew we were growing both creatively and capacity-wise. So the question, if you didn't hear it, was how do you challenge the mentality of this is the way it's always been done? That's really hard. I mean, it's probably hard in every industry, but it's really hard, especially like, so my company wears two hats, kind of creative and concept, and then production. So the idea and the making of the thing. And on the production side, there are so many old habits that are dying so hard in our industry. But there's a studio in Northeast Minneapolis, or north, wherever, I guess, called Cinequipped. They're a rental house, and they have a studio there, and we shoot there a lot. And they've got a poster in there. I'm going to get to your answer. We're going to get there. And the poster is the Minneapolis-St. Paul production map, and it was from like the late 90s, maybe. And it's awesome. It's like hand illustrated, and it's got all these different like production vendors in town, right? And if you go up and look at it, like 90% of them are gone. And a lot of it is because they do something that technology rendered unnecessary at this point. So anyone know what dailies are? Very few, right? Right. Jeremy knows, and that's about it. Dailies are like, you'd have a shoot on the coasts, and you'd have to ship back your dailies and watch them with client here, or et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's no tape anymore. Very rarely is there film coming from the set, much less needing to get on an airplane to get somewhere. So a lot of that is just, technology caught up to you, and that was that. Like, Kodak is struggling because people don't buy film. But the other thing is, there's a lot of people on there who probably did a really good job at what they were doing, but thought that the way it was for 5-10 years for them was the way it was always going to be, or was always supposed to be. And we, as you said earlier, like, stumbled accidentally into our industry. We didn't really know the rules. I didn't know what a budget should be. I was like, I don't know, what does it cost to get a shooter? Hey, I'll edit it. What is that worth to me? Like, I mean, I had some reference from the TV world and the film world, but they're different. So we got really good at just figuring out a way to say yes. And along the way, doing that caused us to break rules we didn't even know existed. So to your answer, how do you challenge the way it's always been? I guess I would say by finding the spots where you can go around or go through or above. And if people say, whoa, what are you doing? I'm not saying start just throwing best practices out the window and be like, well, I didn't edit it because who cares? You know, it's just, nobody cares about AP style. Well, they do care about AP style. But it's more like if you see inefficiency, especially when it's tied to somebody's bottom line or someone's job, that's when it's hard, because there are a lot of people we do a lot of work with. I won't name names, but there's a large retailer in town that has lots and lots and lots of people doing lots and lots and lots of jobs that if you just look for a minute and remove the human beings from the situation, there's a lot of waste, tons of waste. And that goes all over the place, but it takes the ability to say, I think there's a better way to do this, and how do you do that without, A, getting fired, and pissing someone off, but B, also doing it in a productive way, where it's not just, this is unnecessary, it's stupid, but more like, hey, what if we tried blank? But yeah, I don't know. For us, it kind of happened out of small, what were small budgets to other people. We'd start getting calls, and we'd be like, I can do it for that. Are you kidding me? So anyway, okay, that's huge. So I in there made a point, like, if you're not doing what you love, you totally can. I'm guessing most of you don't have an excuse. But clearly it's scary as hell. So I sort of romanticized some of the, like, I left my TV job and I started waiting tables and everything was great. Like, I was scared shitless. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I walked away from a great job with no idea what I was going to be doing, just that I want to do something different. And I remember that day having lunch with my then roommate. It was surreal. It was bizarre. It wasn't like leaving the PR job after 36 hours. That was more like, I don't like that job. I guess it's not for me. This was like, I left a career in an industry where I could have grown on the table, and I didn't even really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to try something different. So I guess that the advice I would give is that leap, that moment of fear, is part of the process. And do it in a smart way, right? Like, if you're going to make a jump and you're going to say, I think I might need to be on my own for a few months, or, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a job. Like, well, although I would say with a relationship, it's a lot different, because with a relationship, it's like you don't want to stay in a relationship. You don't want to be in longer than you do, because it's just going to hurt people. But with a job, it's different, because you got to pay bills. You got to pay the rent. You got to pay the heat. So have an eye on something. But also get involved in other organizations. Be a volunteer here and there. Get involved in stuff like this. Like, just meeting more people will give you a great sense of the opportunity out there. And perhaps people will find you that you didn't even know you needed. They need you. And so, yeah. But the fear piece is hard, and it's very real. I think it's probably why I act so goofy, because then I'm not showing that I'm afraid. But like, let's just go nuts and play drums and have beers and wear flag pants and blah. It's like, deep inside there's a super anxious person. But it's a lot easier just to, like, medicate it and, like, and yeah, and medication. Yeah, I can't write you a script, but But the fear piece is huge. If you're going to make a big change, whether it's a different job or a different role at your job, or even the courage to go up to your boss and say, I think I'm worthy of this position and I could help us do this better, and here's why, whatever, that takes guts. It's not easy. And you will fail at it sometimes, and you might be like, what the hell am I doing? But if you're listening to that voice that says, no, this is right, it's just going to take a while, and you can always go back. You can always, like, no, very few people say, yeah, I left my job and realized it was the worst decision I ever made, and then I wanted it back. How often do you hear that? Very, very rarely. So usually people who love their job stay, and people who hate their jobs stay. But it's the people who hate their jobs that should start to think about, well, I'm probably not a good asset for this company if I don't like being here. And that could even be your own company. If you're doing something, if you're like, yeah, I make really great rugs, but I don't like making rugs, I'd rather make beer, then you're costing the world better beer and yourself a better existence by keeping making those dumb rugs. Stop making the rugs, learn how to make beer. When the time is right, open your brewery. So there we go. Maybe, yeah. Sorry. I don't know. Like, yeah, living in it, right? Embracing the fear. Yeah, ignoring it, sure, but embracing it, or just running headfirst at it, I don't know. I don't know. I'm like getting anxious talking about the fear, but like, I'm supposed to go talk about Hamburger Helper in an hour, and now I'm going to be like a mess in the car. But there is a waffle taco, and they do sustain, let me tell you. I don't know. Yeah, let me think about that, right? But, yeah, hi? Someone say something? No, okay. Yeah, live with the fear. But learn to look at the fear and laugh at the fear. There's a zen to some of this, right? Because what is the fear really? Like very, very few of you, and if one of you is in this situation and it's like, no, I literally can't quit my job because I'm gonna be evicted tomorrow, then don't quit your job. But like, especially like I hate when I have friends who are white, male, college educated and go, oh, I hate what I'm doing. You have so much privilege that you had nothing to do with. Like, then change it. Like, then change what you're doing. Don't sit around and complain about it. And so, there's a zen to it. There's a zen of like, wow, I'm super scared. But then ask yourself, of what? What are you really scared of? You're not, you probably have a great support structure. You might just be scared of loving what's coming next and not knowing what to do with a happy existence. So, if I wasn't running my shop, that's a great question. It's weird because I started as an editor, morphed into a director. I've always been a writer. Now I'm often behaving like a new business / executive producer of stuff I'm not even directing. So if I was just on my own, I'd probably be doing creative development, concept development, and maybe new business. But you can't do new business for nobody. Like, what do? I do new business. For who? For me. Well, what do you make, though? I do new business. So, like, it's sort of a snake eating its own tail. Like, things are good over at new business. So I don't. What the hell am I talking about? So I guess what I would say is I would either stay in the creative field or I would quite often I think I want to start a bar or I would love to move somewhere and start a coffee shop or learn how to apply more sunscreen and do a taco stand on a beach somewhere. But everybody has that desire. Everybody's got their blow it up plan. Like, what if we just blow it up? I've got a really good friend. Some of you may know him, Nate Eklund. Really good dude. His brother owns a shop in town called Cicerone, Andrew Eklund. But Nate and his spouse and their 2 kids just went to New York for 2 years, right? Manhattan. Like, they're going to live in Manhattan. He's working with a school district there. He does like education consulting. And I remember when he told me, I was like, that's crazy. That's crazy. You're gonna move to New York, just gonna uproot your kids in 5th and 7th grade or whatever. And he said so many people were like, I can't believe you're doing that. Man, that's nuts. I'm so jealous. But I felt that way too. And he's like, it's not hard at all. Like, it's really not hard at all. It's actually not even that crazy. Like, he's in a really kick-ass city for 2 years and he's renting his house. But it's so rare to do something like that. So anyway, I went on a tangent. But yeah, I'd probably do something really different, actually. I love what I do. I'd probably consult as much as I had to pay the bills and then start something crazy and new. That had nothing to do with marketing. As much as marketing's been good to me and I enjoy it, maybe I'd help sell the right products just enough to pay the bills, but then not more than that. I think restlessness is super healthy creatively, really healthy. People write great songs when they're broke and have their hearts broken and like as soon as like I, make your joke here. I actually really like John Mayer. I think he's a very talented dude. He's a bit of a douche, but he's a talented dude. But when he met Katy Perry and like fell in love, his songs started to suck. Like, dude, Born and Raised was a kick-ass album, man. It was like a throwback to like some old Neil Young stuff. And you can go back and find other artists through the ages. Like when they're sad or angsty or restless, the stuff rocks. And suddenly we're like, I'm in love and everything's great. Like, I love Paul McCartney, but like, you think that people would have had enough of silly love songs? It's like, yeah, come on, man. Like, really? Like, no. And that whole song was about like, I'm just happy. I just want to write love songs. Like, awesome. But I'm going to go listen to John Lennon because he was making something that felt a little bit more artistic. Although I love McCartney. But so point I guess I'm saying is some of that's healthy. When you start to feel, but when it goes the other extreme, when you lose the ability to create whatever creating means to you, because of whatever, it feels claustrophobic or you feel an unrest or whatever, then it's not healthy because then you're not harnessing it, you're not motivating yourself with it, you're just sort of smothered by it. But the flip side is like, yeah, like people who like, oh, I'm gonna go freelance, and like sometimes you spend your first month like doing nothing but like going to coffee shops and eating Cheetos. And you're like, this is great, no one can tell me otherwise. But then you'll also start to suck. Like both extremes aren't productive. The middle and somewhere is good. A little bit of unrest, a little bit of freedom, something good as a result. So, hey, all right. Awesome, thank you guys.